All right, we have to start this as Bishop Sheen used to start his programs, not with a prayer, but with a joke. So some of you will get this. When I was a kid, I went to a Jesuit high school. I went to Loyola High School in downtown LA. And at one point when I was a senior, I thought, you know, it's an interesting lifestyle. I think maybe I'd like to join the Jesuits. And then I thought to myself, you know, I'd really rather remain Catholic.
You get these later on.
Okay, well, good morning, and it's great to have all you folks here. Originally, this parish was to be called St.
Good morning.
You have I was going to say you have a handsome escort, but it's Cookie. Originally, this parish was to be known as St. Bridget's, but the name was changed to St. Raymond's. What's interesting is that before the church was built, there were actually 3 pastors here that came and went. It was the third one, though, Father Hanley, who really got things going here. The bishop of the diocese, this diocese now is part of the Diocese of San Bernardino. That back then, and this is about 1950, it was the Diocese of San Diego. So the San Diego diocese came all the way up here through Amboy and even farther north. In fact, I was thinking about this when I was thinking about the talk last night, and this actually is true, this part, unlike my other story. When I was a kid, we used to go up to Mammoth a lot, and I remember the area codes. The area code for Los Angeles was 213. And for San Diego, all the way up to Mammoth Lakes was 7, as I recall, was 760. It was all just those couple of area codes. And Santa Barbara was 805, and later you have the 714. Now look at how many area codes we have. And it's kind of like that because of the expanding population. With the Catholic diocese, they've split up into different sections as you get more and more people. So this, of course, is no longer the Diocese of San Diego. It's the Diocese of San Bernardino. And it was through their archives that I got a lot of the information that went on the plaque, which isn't behind me. So I can imagine as I'm going through the information from the diocese, what it must have been like for that first pastor to come on out here, and this is my pastorage here, my parish. Wow, there's a lot of people here. Well, there were about 40 families here. And they went essentially all the way from Ludlow, all the way along 66, to the little communities that we've investigated through our Clamper trips, our Vituscans and our Hemis and other trips, all the way down through Cadiz and down through all the way down to Essex and even farther. All those families, you know, they're scattered around. And at that time, if I'm not mistaken, Chubbuck was still going down over here to our southeast. There was a community there with a number of Catholic families, and they had nowhere to go to Mass. So at first what happened was Roy was kind enough to donate an unused house, and nobody knows exactly where the house was because obviously all of that is gone. You have to imagine Amboy in the early 50s had many, many more houses and even businesses right in this area and across the street as well. So one of those houses was used for Mass. And Father would say Mass at 6 in the morning and at 8 in the morning. Got a little crowded in there in that little house, so it was decided that they would build a church. Just like with everything, when you're in a parish, you got to kind of come up with your own money and your own resources for this sort of thing. And the bishop of San Diego, his name was Bishop Buddy, which at first I was confused because I said, it says Bishop Buddy. Wait a minute. It was a weird play on words because it sounded like the bishop was somebody's buddy. But that was I went and looked it up to confirm, but that was his last name. Bishop Buddy gave his approval for the parish up here. It was the third pastor, Father Hanley, who came up and really got the program going to build the church. It came up with a design for a cinder block church, for a rectory, and for a little grotto here for Our Lady. The Madonna itself has been removed years ago, but the grotto itself, that's the stone right there in front of the fence, for that to be built. Father Hanley came from Chicago, and I could imagine his coming all the way from Chicago, probably the biggest archdiocese in the country, full of Irish Catholics there, and coming here and again looking at all of his new parish, which in area was probably 3 times the size of his old parish in Chicago, but had just a fraction of the people. But with the assistance of the wife of the superintendent of the salt mine over here, Father was able to get money from the Catholic Assistance League back in Chicago. Every summer he'd go back and ask for more money, ask for more money. When you're a pastor, you got to be really good at asking for money. And they were able to build a church here. Now, over its lifespan from 51, that's when it became St. Raymond's, from St. Bridget's to St. Raymond's. The church had 9 different pastors up until 1972. And 71 or 72, of course, Interstate 40 was put through, and as they say, it was like a faucet being turned off on Route 66. That the traffic just simply disappeared. And with the decline of Amboy, Baghdad, the other communities, there was the family started to move away. So by 1971, it was decided to close the parish. The church still stood here, but the land had been donated to the Diocese of San Diego, and then which became San Bernardino, and then in 1980 by Roy. Then in 1980, the property was returned to Roy's family, to the owners of whoever had Amboy back in 1980. Now the church itself, if you look at it,
there used to be
a steeple on the top, and a lot of you guys who have traveled Route 66, every time you traveled it, you'd see that steeple leaning a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and finally it leaned over too much, and it fell, and they put the cross up in its place. So you have to imagine a straight-sided and then an angled steeple with a cross on top of that. The plaque over here at the cornerstone over here, you see AMDG, dedicated March 8th, 1951. When the parish was dedicated, the bishop came up from San Diego. He said the dedication mass, blessed the altar. Back in those days, if you're an old timer in the Catholic Church, you probably remember that the altar did not face the people. The altar faced the crucifix, so it faced forward in the old rite. And the altar itself would have had a relic, a saint's relic, either a first, second, or third class relic in the altar itself. So he would have come, placed that relic, blessed the altar, and dedicated the church. And then he confirmed about a dozen or so young people into the Catholic Church. The inscription AMDG is Latin, Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam, which means for the greater glory of God. That's actually is the motto of the Jesuits. Inside, if you peek through the windows, you'll see a mural. Now, my understanding is that mural was painted during Desert Strike. And JJ isn't here, is he? No. Ex-Noble Grand Humbug Jim Jackson did one of his clamp outs down in Needles for Operation Desert Strike. It was apparently one of the soldiers from Desert Strike that painted the mural. Maybe somebody has some more updated information that lives in the area here. As I said, during the period of time that the parish was active, you had families coming in from all the different communities, and then there was what we call a mission up in Ludlow, St. Michael's. So the priest here would drive up on a Sunday, so all the folks from Ludlow didn't have to drive all the 30 miles down from there to here to attend Mass. He would drive up there and do Mass up there, which is something that in the kind of the outer regions is still done today. If you go up 395, you have a couple of churches. There's a church in Lone Pine, and then there's a mission in Big Pine, and then another church in Bishop. So you have the priests coming and sharing that so that people can get to Mass when they need to. Again, the final Mass was said in 1971 when the parish was closed. 9 pastors in 20 years is kind of a lot, so I can imagine. The one who served the longest was Father Hanley, but I can imagine that if you're rotated through, usually they give you a 2-year, nowadays they give you a 2-year time limit for your pastor, for being the pastor. It just kind of goes with what the parish needs, other duties as assigned, that sort of thing. So I'm sure a number of those priests really kind of liked it out here. I'm sure a number of them said, man, I can't wait till my time's up. I can get back to San Diego, or somewhere civilized like Ludlow. I understand there's a gentleman here who, I just heard it through the grapevine here. There's a gentleman here who was a altar server. Ah, and you live down here in Cadet. What's your name?
Cadet Walter.
Walter. Well, that would have been.
School in Amboy. I used to walk single file as a kid, come to catechism.
Crazy.
Father Al was the father, and he had some lemon drops that were hard as rocks, but yeah, they were a treat.
Yeah.
We were good kids. And my mom and dad got married here in '56.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. This is awesome.
Her friend, her husband was the one that built the grotto. Tito Candelaria. Yeah, he did the grotto. Well, he's passed, rest in peace. But yeah, we used to do I used to be an altar boy at this church.
Now,
Cool.
so
Father Al was the father.
he was the last pastor, right?
I believe so, right?
Yeah, Kowalski is a Polish name, I think. Polish guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And you were married here in what?
56 or 57.
Wow.
Married
Nice.
in 57 here. Wow.
Do you remember the priest's name? That married you?
Father Al?
That was the same guy, Father Al.
Oh no, the priest that married is Father Porro.
Father Puro. Oh, very good.
Father Porro was the one that married him.
All right.
Yeah, man. Fact check.
I used to clean all those motel rooms over there.
You used to work here,
I
right?
was a man.
Now, did you live here in Amboy or down in?
I lived in Cadiz.
Right, Cadiz as well.
That's cool.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Sure happy to
We
have
had to make it.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
surprised to see all you guys.
Yeah. Never seen this many people.
Beautiful.
All right. Well, thank you very much for
Yeah,
letting
that's
me
awesome.
talk, and I think most of what I said was correct.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
If you will, up in San Francisco, Smith made a deal with Clark, who owned the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad, and they said, "Hey, you know what? Clark says you're wanting to bring some your borax down from the Death Valley country. Why don't you link up with the SPLA and SL right there in Las Vegas? It's only about 110 miles. Should be easy to go." So Smith said, "Hey, that's a great idea." The problem he had was that his board of directors thought that's not going to work money-wise because railroads are very expensive. And so Smith said, "Okay, well, we'll put in a traction road instead. Got a couple of traction engines, steam traction engines over at Borate. We'll bring those over." Now he knew this wasn't going to work, but he had to demonstrate that it wasn't going to work before the board of directors would sign on to do a railroad. And so he graded out the road for the steam traction engines, knowing that that was eventually going to become a railroad bed. So he grades it out, and on the first trip out, these things crap out. And there he goes to his board of directors, says, "You know, the steam traction engines are just not reliable. It just broke down a few miles out of Death Valley Junction. What are we going to do?" "Oh, well, we can put in a railroad." All right, so now he's got what he wants because he knows railroads and he knows that railroads are reliable. So he says, "All right, we've got our deal with Clark. We'll start grading, we'll start building." And he sends his crews up to Vegas. Well, when he gets his guys up to Vegas to start building this railroad, the railroad men for the SPLA and SL say, "You're not laying track here." He goes, "What do you mean?" He said, "We have orders not to let you lay track and cross and join into our." "Well, Senator Clark said it was okay." "Well, Senator Clark's out of the country. He's in Paris, and this is 1905. So you're not just going to call him up and say, 'Hey, what the hell's going on?' You know, you got to send a cable, all that kind of stuff. Nobody can find him. He's in some whorehouse somewhere. I don't know where he is." Finally, he gets the idea, okay, this isn't going to work. So he decides that what he's going to do instead is redirect the railroad south, and he makes a deal with the Santa Fe. These tracks right here. He says, well, the nearest, the only town through which the Santa Fe goes, that's anywhere near where he needs to have his ore brought to, is here at Ludlow. Now, it's a significantly longer trip now. It was going to be 110 miles. Now it's going to be 170 miles up to the mines up there in Death Valley country. But it's the only thing he's got. So in 1905, by August, they've made the deal with the Santa Fe. By November of 1905, they're already laying rail here. And he decided that this being the only real spot of civilization that's accessible in any way by rail that already exists, this would be the base of operations for the Tonopah and Tidewater. Now, how come it's called Tonopah and Tidewater? Well, everybody has these grandiose ideas, loathsome delusions of grandeur, if you will. And so he figured, oh, well, it'll sound great if we're going to extend all the way from Tonopah, Nevada, all the way to the Tidewater at San Diego. Well, it reached neither of those spots. Instead, it really kind of made it up towards Beatty there at Rhyolite, and it terminated right here when it was finally finished. So they started laying the rails, and what you'll see if you look, you don't even have to look closely, even one of us can see this, but you'll see that over here there's a bunch of debris, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But if you follow that line that looks like a berm all the way out, it curves around and around to this side of those white tank cars over there that are off their trucks. You'll see it curves along until it hits Old 66 and then the highway, and it'll keep curving around and then straightens out as it heads towards those mountains and hooks a left through that lake bed. That's Broadwell Dry Lake right there. That's a loop track, what they call a balloon track. And so they started building track from here north across Broadwell Dry Lake through Crucero, which is where it crossed over the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad, up towards Silver Lake, not the Silver Lake in LA, okay, different one, the one just to the north of Baker, okay, up through Silver Lake and on up, and it was pretty easy going for that first section of track. Problem was when they hit the Amargosa Canyon on the other side of the Dumont Dunes. You've been to the Dumont Dunes, right? Bill West has been to the Dumont Dunes. Did you have a clamp out? No. Did you have a clamp out when you were a humbug there? Or, no, that was somebody. I'm thinking of a Vituscan trip we had up there. Yeah. Once they get to Dumont, now they got to hit the Amargosa Canyon, and that sumbitch, they thought they'd be there through there in a month. It took them a year to get through the few miles of the Amargosa Canyon. In the meantime, what was happening was that Senator Clark said, you know what? That's kind of a cool idea of bringing a railroad up to the Death Valley country, because Bullfrog, Goldfield, Rhyolite, those places are booming now. I'm going to build my own railroad, and I'll parallel the Tonopah and Tidewater. So Clark built out of Las Vegas, north towards Rhyolite and Bullfrog and Goldfield, and he called his railroad the Las Vegas and Tonopah. Okay, so now you got two railroads going through uninhabited desert, both headed to the same place, with nobody to ride them. Especially the LV&T. At least the T&T had a commercial purpose. That was to bring the borax down. But the LV&T, the Las Vegas and Tonopah, was primarily going to be passenger dependent. And there wasn't any passengers. We'll get into that more in a second. Anyway, because of the Amargosa Canyon, the Las Vegas and Tonopah made it into Rhyolite, the station at Rhyolite first. In fact, it was a full year. It was 1906 when the LV&T got into Rhyolite. There were marching bands and celebrations and all that, because the railroad's finally here at Rhyolite, which, if you don't know where Rhyolite is, I don't know where it is either, so that makes two of us. Rhyolite is just to the west of Beatty. You know where Beatty, Nevada is. Now, if you don't know where that is, I can't help you.
They got a whorehouse there.
There you go.
Good one. We knew you'd know that.
All right, so now LV&T makes it to Rhyolite. It's taking advantage of the mining boom in that part of Nevada. T&T is still struggling through the Amargosa Canyon. Finally, they punch through, and they bring their tracks into Rhyolite in fall of 1907. So now the railroad's complete. No marching bands, though. No hookers or anything like that in beer, unless you had a lot of money. Because by 1907, there's financial trouble in the United States, and the mining industry is starting to go downhill. They can't get any capital to develop the mines up there. So what are you going to do? Now you got these two railroads, and nobody's there to ride them. Well, the T&T. Let's focus more on the T&T. So now you have a railroad from here to Ludlow. The shops are right here. The debris I was talking about a moment ago is where the shops were located. And I don't know if Mark's going to let you, because he's pretty mean as a head abbot. I don't want to fuck with him, but maybe you guys do as a group. And that is, if he lets you walk out in here a little bit, you can see where the locomotive pits were, where they bring the locomotives up to empty the fireboxes, get all the clinkers and ash out of the fireboxes, do any other servicing. You can see they're man deep when they were built. Now, of course, they're filled with sand and a whole bunch of other stuff, but they're still, you know, what, about 3 feet deep. But you can see them clearly. You can see where the tracks were laid. You can see the ties. Mark and myself and who else was with us a couple weeks ago? Scooter, I think, was with us. A couple other guys. We're looking around here and finding probably where the actual, like the locomotive shop, the carpenter's shop, and other shops were around there. There's lots of debris still out there. You can see piles of coal over there, a lot of old coal clinkers and ash still up over there as well.
And an old trailer step.
Oh yeah, the old trailer steps. Now the end kind of came here in, you know, obviously this is a land of little rain, but when it does rain, it rains. There was a period of time in the 30s where they got a couple of cloud bursts, and the tracks, and already by this time, by the 1930s, the LV&T was gone. The federal government said you can go ahead and abandon that line. There's nobody riding it. It's not making any money. The TNT never really was a big money maker. Its real purpose was to bring that borax down from the Death Valley country to transship it onto the Santa Fe line right here. So it always had that as a backup. But even by the late 20s, that borax was starting to run out, and they were starting to shift their production over to boron. You know where boron is, over on Highway 58 near Four Corners. And so those mines, Ryan first, and then New Ryan, was starting to shut down. So you have less and less traffic. Plus the mines between here and Death Valley Junction, like up around Tonopah and Shoshone, those are starting. The Noonday and those other mines are starting to play out as well. So it was always on a shoestring budget, and so by 1930 it was really getting bad. A series of floods, flash floods between here and Crucero, wiped out the tracks to the point where it was no longer economical to restore them. And so what they did was they took all of the equipment from Ludlow here in about 1930 or 32, and I'm brain farting because the exact year is now just escaped me. That's what happens when you deal with teenagers every day. And they brought it all up to Death Valley Junction. So the center of operations moved from here, from Ludlow, up to Death Valley Junction. And that whole section from here to Crucero was just abandoned. By 1939, 1940, there's just no traffic on the railroad anymore to make it pay. All of the mine production for the borax company had switched to boron by that time. The borax company applied to the Interstate Commerce Commission for abandonment of the line in 1939. It was refused by the Interstate Commerce Commission because there was enough people that protested it that did live between here and Death Valley Junction. And then, so they were just running one train a week by the end there. And then finally, in 1940, the Interstate Commerce Commission said, go ahead, you can abandon the TNT. And the last train ran in I believe it was June of 1940. The war is coming now. The tracks are still out there, and just like everywhere else, iron and steel are at a premium for the war effort, and the tracks were torn up by 1942 and salvaged. You can still drive up, though. You can follow the berm of the TNT almost pretty much from here all the way to Rhyolite, Nevada. You can see most of the berm is still there. A few places have washed out. There's still a lot of places with railroad ties, telegraph poles. You go up across Broadwell Dry Lake, you can see where they've cut off the telegraph poles. But on the other side of as you go up the 127 on the other side of Baker, the poles are still standing in long stretches of wires hanging down and so on.
And when you're done.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, poke the bear.
Yeah, thanks. I would have forgotten if he hadn't put his hand up. So, in a moment, he's got a few things to say here about time that he spent out here with the clampers and so on. And I'm trying to think of any other wrap-up stuff that I might have missed.
Well, yeah, one thing when you walk around here, the Tonopah and Tidewater, I counted 16 locomotives on their inventory. So this is where they maintained all the locomotives. So there was an actual engine house. The pictures of the engine house are huge. They could park several locomotives in there. And like you said, you had the boiler shop, the paint shop, several shops, several tracks in there. And then there was a series of bunkhouses over here for the workers and some of the railroad operators and stuff. And you can watch, if you get on Google Earth, it's as plain as day. It's pretty cool. You can follow all the, matter of fact, like you said, you can follow all the track all the way to Beatty, but you can see all the track stuff here. And then two issues I want to talk about before I forget. How many people I won't forget Sid. How many people have two-wheel drive vehicles here?
I have one at home.
No. Okay, it's time.
Rephrase that. Don't behave like one of those teenage girls.
Hey, listen the fuck up for a second. If you have two-wheel drive, if you're going to have a rough time making it under the tracks. I forgot about that section, so I just want you to beware.
Pull them.
Keep it rolling.
Pull them.
You'll probably need four-wheel just to get under. All the sand's going to get churned up. It's deep sand for a little ways. That's the only section. The rest of it's hard-packed dirt road.
We can get around them.
And then one more thing, because this is a good spot, I want to introduce Vituscan celebrity on this trip, Scott. The guy in the green shirt right here. He owns about 4,000 acres of mine claims, and that's what we're going to be on today. From about the Red Dog mine, 4 miles out all the way to Baghdad Chase. He's got the claims. He's the one who's getting us into the mines today. Otherwise, we were not getting into the mines.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, what say the brethren? Yeah.
Now we got Sid.
Grand Humbug, Dr. Sid Plumner.
Okay, well,
Listen up!
Right.
unfortunately for you guys, I get to talk 3 times. So before I was building the ark with Noah, I was here. This was the 3rd stop on the polar bears. The polar bears were the predecessors to the Vituscans, and you'll hear that at Baghdad Chase. So we came and looked over these shops, then we went out across the Broadwell Dry Lake, and those telegraph poles, there were still some there with the original insulator types. And we went all the way up to Crucero, and from there, we went off to Hampton Canyon. But there was, the deal here was that store that you passed was still standing. You could read it. It was something Brothers.
Murphy Brothers.
Yeah, Murphy Brothers store. And then when we talk about the Ragtown plaque, we camped here, and we'll talk about that. But this was the 3rd stop, and we, as Paul was saying, we went up Broadwell, and there we saw the insulators. There was, and the other thing was that the train ran till 39, like he was saying, and then in World War II, they tore up all the rails. So there was a Platrix guy, his name was Hugh Tolford, who bought up all the china that he could get his hands on and the artifacts, and I saw the plates and cups from the Tonopah. So in Baker, we stumbled on, it's no longer there, we stumbled on an original boxcar.
I remember that.
Which had Tonopah and Tidewater on it in somebody's backyard.
Very cool.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, guys,
Awesome, Sid.
15 minutes here, and then we got 2 more quick stops. They're real short quick stops here in Ludlow, and then it's about a 3-mile drive.
Raffle ticket!
I need to talk to you.
Not sure what this place is, but it looks old. Get a little fixer-upper, huh? Got a couple of them out here.
Hey guys, we're gonna have a quick talk on why we stopped here.
All right, we're gonna have a quick talk.
Go guys! We're gonna stop. There's a real-life murder mystery that this is involved in, and I watched. There's like a 1-hour documentary on TV that you can watch about what happened here. So this was the Red Dog Mine office, and we're going to stop at the Red Dog Mine, and we're going to talk about the disappearance of April Pitzer, and who's never been found. And Dave Taylor knows more about that than anybody I know. So,
Where's she at?
he did it.
All right, well, Paul Renner's a hard act to follow. I don't know anything about trains or borax, but when it comes to sex and murder and mysteries and missing person, I'm your guy. What's that, the brethren? Satisfactory. There was a gal that disappeared out here in midsummer of 2004. Her name is April Pitzer. There's been a number of documentaries across the media for that many years since till today about where she is and what happened to her. One of the main suspects in that case was a guy named Dan Dansky, and he frequented this place. This is a place that's a little bit attached in the story to the next stop we're going to make after the cemetery at the Red Dog Mine. He called this the Red Dog Mine office. And he frequented this place before the building collapsed here in the back, and before the story became so popular. There were poems and things that he wrote all over the walls in here that were quite interesting, quite perverse. But over the years, people have taken them off as souvenirs. So there's a little bit of remnants left in there, but not much. But Dan was the main suspect in her disappearance. It's an ongoing investigation. There's a dig that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks with the deputy coroner, myself, and a few other folks in Newberry Springs. And part of the story goes that there were a number of events that happened here that ended up culminating at the Red Dog Mine. You're going to be able to go down in the mine in a couple of stops. But the dogs, the investigators that were out here at the time, the SO search team, the dogs did indicate, and there is significant area down in the mine where somebody most likely was. She was then removed and taken someplace else once the investigation started rolling. But the connection here is Dan Dansky. If you go on Disappeared on the internet, you can watch episode after episode, probably 3 or 4 hours thereabouts, on where the investigation has been and where it's going, about the folks that used to populate this place. So as you walk around, you can see some of the sayings that are still on in the cabin. Be careful because it's getting pretty dilapidated. And then in the back, you'll see Red Dog Mine over the workshop back there. This is a place that he called home a lot, which was the trailer, and there's a lot of markings in there. Wherever Dan went, he left his signature, so to speak. So he's kind of an easy guy to trail along. As we were searching out here over the many years, it's amazing in this desert how many bodies you find, but they're not the ones you're looking for.
Wow.
You know, we'd find bones and just simply rebury them, especially there at Ragtown, which is going to be one of the stops. There's a lot of ancient burial grounds. If you know what to look for, they're not that hard to spot. We had the deputy coroner out here on a number of occasions, David Van Norman, and you know, he said that if the bodies stood up out here, it looked like you know, the forest. You know, there's that many. He's got enough bones down in his office, I guess, in San Bernardino. He said to build a picket fence from here to state line. So but the one you're looking for, you know, that's where you're going, and anything else is just fog, and it kind of goofs up the investigation. You just stick them back in the hole. But anyway, that's the connection where we are right now with where we are going at the Red Dog. It's a pretty interesting place. It was you know, all the tweaker hang out.
Sounds
Spain.
Kind of
spun.
Yeah, we talked about
Spain.
Spain on the painted. You used to tell me that was a taunt.
Well, the lead investigator at the time, her name was Spain, and so shortly after they started putting stuff together, someone came out here and wrote her name on the trailer on this building, and then pointed an arrow. I don't know if it's still there in back of there, you know, pointing to the ground. So, you know, there's been a million different ways that she's been killed, and a million different ways where she's at.
The guy asked where Dan is still alive.
Dan, everybody connected with this case, all the primary suspects in this case, died mysteriously in the course of two years.
COVID related?
Yeah, COVID related. Four of the individuals ended up dying in a plane crash on their way to Arizona. And Dan died of cancer, and he was asked if there was anything he wanted to get off his mind, off his chest, you know, before he passed away, and he said no. But he did indicate when the search teams were out here, he would say that, you know, they're close, but they haven't gone far enough. And so, you know, instead of following all of those rumors, you know, you kind of just have to piece together the facts as best you can. Otherwise, you'll be looking all over the desert. You know, you'll have a pile of bones, and none of them will be April.
When did he die?
He died about 2014, thereabouts.
7 years ago.
And the dig that we have going on in the next couple of weeks, we've been waiting on some permitting and some other issues, but that individual, it's going to be on his property, and he died within a year of Dan. He was an interesting guy. He'd been out here since the late 70s when he came out here to make his home in various buildings out here. He did 2 tours in Vietnam. When he got out in 74, he wasn't, obviously he was a different person. So there's been a lot of speculation that he was the Route 66 killer. I guess a lot of you folks know that where we are in Ludlow, all the way down to Essex, it was kind of I don't want to say a killing ground, but you find a lot of neat stuff on the side of the road. You know, feet and hands and breasts and heads. They just found a torso a couple of years ago there in Essex. So, you know, there's a lot of interesting things that go on out here. So much for the locomotives and all of that other stuff. But anyway.
So the next stop, we're going to skip because it's literally 300 yards down there. So I'm going to tell you about it's the Ludlow Cemetery.
People are dying to
Scott Martin knows about it. I talked to a guy named, I can't remember what Doug's last name is. Erickson. Anyway, it's a cemetery that goes back from 1903 to 1933. There's about 50 bodies in there. They don't know who most of them are. There's a few markers in there, and there's one large grave with a small grave next to it. He said they suspect it was a mom that died in childbirth, but they quit burying people there in 33. But there's some interesting markers in there, and it's been well taken care of. So if you ever want to come back, you can check it out. It doesn't need much work. Like we've been working on a couple other cemeteries that need some work, but that one somebody's been taking care of very well. So once we leave here, we're going to head straight out to the old peat mine, and then the Red Dog mine. The Red Dog mine will be our lunch stop.
All right.
All right.
Sir,
Yes.
there's just one thing we forgot about the Tonopah and Tidewater. Death Valley Scotty, when he built that castle, they needed firewood, so they got all the railroad ties. And when they discovered they were creosote, they couldn't burn them. So if you go from Death Valley Scotty's place up on the hill, there's like 1,000 ties. The other thing I have a question for Dave Taylor. You said there's this episodes.
Yeah.
Are these? If we watch this, is this better than watching episodes of Dancing with the Stars?
Oh, they're pretty good.
Well, unfortunately, these people are horizontal, so they couldn't dance. But yeah, there's numerous episodes. They've had a few 1-hour television programs that featured it.
The series, if you can pull up, the series is called Disappeared, and it's one that's specifically on April Pitzer's called Mojave Mystery. And it's, yeah, so.
Nice talk, Dave Taylor.
All right, yeah.
All right, we're heading out to the old peat mine.
Here we go. Red Dog Mine. Just gotta watch out walking around all this wood with the nails in it. I do have my tetanus shot, but I don't want to step on a rusty nail.
And there was a community out here known as at the Baghdad Chase Mine as Rochester, Stedman. It had several names over the years. It was a company town, so there was no booze, no hookers. And the miners had very bad morale, so some enterprising people came down here and set up Ragtown, which was only 3 miles by rail from Baghdad Chase. So the miners could either catch the train and either go to Ragtown, or they can continue on to Ludlow, but that was another 4 miles, and they had less time to drink and do whatever because the train would be coming back from Ludlow. Now if they came to Ragtown and they missed a train going back, it was only a 3-mile walk. They'd walk up the roadbed, go back on the deal. The other thing was the train never stopped in Ragtown because it was coming down this valley, so they were trying to get a little bit of momentum. So when it was going through Ragtown, it was going anywhere from 12 to 15 miles an hour.
Jump.
The miners just jumped off, had their fun, had their booze, had their hookers, and had a good time, spent their money. And some of them would wait for the train to come back. To catch the train coming back, since the train wouldn't stop, they'd get on the uphill grade where the train speed would drop down about 3-4 miles an hour, and then they could all hop on the train. So, yeah, so that was pretty much Ragtown's extent. It thrived on keeping the miners' morale up in Baghdad Chase. So once Baghdad Chase was done, Ragtown was done. There was still, I guess, a couple structures here in the 90s. But they're all gone, and most of them disappeared pretty quick because they were just wood frame, canvas-sided structures, and that's how it got its name. So that's about it on that. Yeah.
What is the purpose of this structure?
This is a head frame. So the head frames would lower up and down vertical shafts.
Bring the ore up for that here, then
Yeah.
it up and dump it in the
Yeah, so right here where this was, there'd be a cart. There.
The car itself.
There's a big hole here.
So, yes. Okay.
Okay, and the reason the monument was placed where it was because we didn't have to get anybody's permission at that time because it was BLM property.
Okay.
At that time, we would simply go out to wherever we wanted to do it and put a plaque up. That's why the plaque
Hold it down.
That's why the plaque at Camp Rock Springs is where it is. And that's why the trash truck plaque at the end of Seymour Road is where it is. Because when they went up, we didn't have to have anybody's permission.
Okay. So, yeah, and we're going to stop at the one Billy Holton plaque that's just down here around the corner.
And Bill Pearson is responsible for us doing that plaque.
Bill
Nice.
Pearson is here. Okay, hey guys.
Is Bill Pearson here?
What's that?
Serious shit!
Oh no, I'm sorry, not Bill. I'm sorry. No, he's not. So listen up. So we heard the first part of the April Pitzer story when she disappeared. This mine here has a key part in her story, and I'm going to have Dave Taylor talk about what they found here and stuff. Wherever he went, here he is.
Okay, so shortly after April disappeared, a lady was riding a bus in Barstow, and she said that I know where that gal is. She's in a hole in the desert south of Ludlow. And because the folks knew Dan and his hole, which is the Red Dog Mine he claimed as his own, it didn't take too much investigation to figure out she was pointing to this particular area. So once the weather cleared a little bit, this was a little bit later in the year in 2005, investigators came out here, a mining crew or a confined space rescue crew came out from Arizona, and they lowered dogs down here and went around the various air shafts. A lot of the back part of the mine is you can't get back there anymore. So it was raining, it was bad, the dogs did indicate a couple of times, and it was obvious that something had been moved. If you go down in here, I can't remember whether it's the right or left side, there you'll see little bits of what we call desert tortillas, and that's the blue tarps, because they're very indicative of why people use tarps to wrap their evidence in, who knows. But so you'll see some of that down here, and we do have photographs of both Dan and his partner here loading something. Somebody had taken the picture unbeknownst to them. But anyway, a lot of time was spent out here, both not only in this mine, but we're going to go next, and then all around the hills here. It was gone over with a fine-tooth comb for many months, and in fact, many years until other stuff surfaced. But one thing that I didn't say, I was saving it for out here, that Dan was noted for. So on any particular weekend, about where the Ford is parked there with the flags, there was a building there. It was kind of like a bunkhouse, and it stood up until probably, I don't know, what, 5, 10
Well, there was
years ago.
8 of them. They were old trailers.
Yeah, and so they partied out here. Then there was
They cooked meth out there.
right, there was a fire ring over here, and Dan had an entire array of women's clothing.
Weirdo.
So he'd be out here tweaking, just dolled up like nobody's business. And he'd be dancing around the fire, and he was open about it, right? He was a big guy. The saying out here for many years that we all heard, and it was true, he ruled this place from Newberry Springs out here to state line with an iron fist. He was a big guy, and nobody messed with him. But this was his place. This was his getaway place when he wasn't down in Newberry Springs doing all this nefarious things. The same group involved with this for many years was breaking into the boxcars or into the containers out here in Ludlow when they would sidetrack and whatever. So they had a lot of nefarious stuff going on out here. So what ended up happening to April, it's surmised that something happened to her, probably unintentionally here, and she was put here, and then as the investigation progressed, she was then moved back or moved into Newberry Springs, where she was living temporarily. But you can go down there, a lot of stuff has been removed, but like I said before, Dan left his signature everywhere. So if you get on Google Earth, just on the other side of the hills, there's another grave over there we never made it to on the pre-runs, but Dan left his signature you could only see from the air. And he wrote out messages that are probably 300 or 400 feet long in basalt, in the volcanic rock. Wow. And when we came out here, or over the months, you'd find stuff written on rocks, you know, April's name, whatever. There was a mattress down in here that was speckled with blood, a lot of blood. The building that was here, one of her clothing, one of her garments was tied in a noose, and it was left hanging here. Her suitcase was found out here, and her clothes were scattered around. I think Doug found that. But yeah, it's been the site of a lot of, and so because of the documentaries and so forth, you know, this place has been pretty well traveled. You know, that usually or had been locked. You couldn't get down in it for some time. But, just a little bit more to the Pitzer story. So when you do, if you do watch it on Discovery or whatever program you choose, you'll see that this is kind of the hub of activity during most of those documentaries.
And they were gold miners. Okay, what?
Well, tweakers are they mine in anything.
But they got their money.
They'll steal your stuff and help you look for it.
Actually, what they were doing, one of the girls that went missing with April, she was found just over the state line in Kern County at the Billy Mine. If anybody sits here, anybody's been to the Billy Mine, they mine colemanite there. But these guys, they travel, you know, quite distances. It takes them a little bit of time. Tweakers are a little low on fuel most of the time. But
It depends on what rock they find.
Low on
Pardon me?
fuel, high on energy.
yeah, that's right. But they found her skull all the way out at the Billy Mine. And she came missing from here. What's that?
The Billy Mine, is that the one in Death Valley?
Yes, just in the Kern side. So when this is a little bit interesting. So we've all been on the Ballarat runs up to the Manson cabin, right? So I think it was before that burnt down. Remember, they had a tip that there was some bodies buried out there.
Right.
Well, Kern County is short on resources. So the deputy and the people that were involved on that dig when Laqueef was found, that was missing from her skull was out there, they pulled off that dig there in Galler Wash, and they went out to the Billy Mine trying to find more pieces of her. And you know, out here, typically when you find a bone or something, the radius is about a mile because that's how far they tend to get spread, either from you know washing
Animals or
through rain
wash,
and wind or animal activity.
Yeah.
So you know the circle gets pretty big, and so that is also connected to here because they were cohorts there in Barstow.
So the cadaver dog hit. What, they think she was moved? She was there for a while, and the body moved, or what?
Correct. So they lowered them down here, and over in the spots that you cannot get to from here, where the vents are, they laid
hit.
down over there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there was two groups of people here. There was
Here's the mine down here, down in the shaft.